My name is Margaret Hale, and I never meant to raise another child at 62. But life doesn't always ask for permission. It just drops a storm on your doorstep and dares you to survive it. It happened on a chilly Saturday morning in November 2011. My daughter, Clara, stood on my porch with her 5-year-old son, Noah, a small backpack, and an even smaller smile. "Just for the weekend, Mum," she said. "I need a break." Noah stood beside her, silent, his little hands pressed tightly over his ears. The faint hum of the refrigerator from inside the house made him flinch. His eyes stayed locked on the porch floor, rocking heel to toe in a rhythm only he understood. I knew something wasn't right. "Clara, honey, what's going on?" She avoided my gaze, mumbled something about stress and needing rest, then turned away before I could stop her. "I'll call you Sunday," she said, already walking to her car, but she never called. Noah didn't cry when she left. He didn't wave. He just kept rocking. I'd taught elementary school for 3 decades and had worked with autistic children before, but this was different. This wasn't a student I could hand back to a parent at 3 p.m. This was my grandson, suddenly mine in every sense of the word. "Hey, Noah," I whispered, crouching to his level. "Want to come inside?" He didn't look at me. Didn't move. Just rocked. I picked up his tiny backpack. It felt far too light for even a 2-day stay. Inside were 2 shirts, a toothbrush and a folded paper, his birth certificate. That night I tried to feed him chicken nuggets. He turned away. Tried toast, pasta, cereal, he wouldn't touch any of it. When I asked what he wanted, he just hummed softly, staring at the wall. Bedtime was worse. When I tried to tuck him in, he screamed like I'd set fire to the room. The sound wasn't pain, it was panic. By morning, I was exhausted and terrified. Clara still hadn't called. Days turned to weeks. The doctor confirmed what I already knew. Noah was autistic. The word didn't scare me, but the silence that followed did. Clara never came back. No letters. No calls, nothing. I told myself she was just struggling, that she'd return once she found her footing. But somewhere deep down I already knew that weekend was never going to end. But 3 months later, a small change in Noah's routine would shatter my denial and force me to face the truth about why my daughter had really left. By February, I'd stopped pretending Clara would call. Every morning I'd still check my phone, but the silence had its own rhythm, steady, predictable, like everything in Noah's world needed to be. We'd built a fragile kind of order together. Breakfast was always the same: scrambled eggs, toast cut diagonally, and milk in the green cup he'd claimed as his own. No noise before 9 a.m, no changes to the route to therapy, no touching unless he reached first. I learned to follow his unspoken rules. One morning, I caught him in the living room lining up toy cars. At first I thought it was random play, but then I saw the pattern, arranged by colour, shade by shade, from deep red to soft yellow. The gradient was so perfect it looked printed. I whispered, "That's beautiful, Noah." He didn't look at me, but his rocking slowed. It was the closest thing to connection we'd had. The world outside didn't understand him. Neighbours whispered when they saw him cover his ears at church bells or bolt away from barking dogs. One woman even said, "He just needs discipline." I smiled politely and walked away before I said something I'd regret. People confuse quiet with broken. At therapy, his occupational therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Lynn, said, "He's not defiant, Margaret. He's overwhelmed. His world is too loud. I wrote that down. It helped me remember on the bad days, the days when Noah would throw his food, or rock until sweat dripped from his temples, or hum through the night without rest. I'd sit outside his door and whisper, 'It's okay, sweetheart. I'm still here.' but even routine couldn't keep the cracks from forming. One Sunday, the power went out mid-morning. No cartoons, no familiar sounds, no hum of the heater, just silence. Within minutes, Noah started screaming. Not words, just fear. I lit a candle, held it near so he could see me. "It's just the lights," I whispered. "They'll come back." He didn't understand the words, but when I didn't move, he stopped screaming. For the first time, he looked straight at me, just for 2 seconds, but long enough for me to feel something shift. That night, when the lights flickered back on, he walked to the kitchen and handed me the green cup, as if to say thank you. That tiny act broke something in me, not from pain, but from the realization that he was letting me in, slowly, carefully. And yet, as spring came, I began to wonder if my daughter's silence was more than guilt. Something told me she hadn't just abandoned Noah. She was running from something. I didn't know it then, but one forgotten envelope in my mailbox would soon tell me exactly what Clara had been hiding all along. It was a Thursday morning in early April when I found it. A plain white envelope with no return address, tucked between utility bills and grocery coupons. My name was handwritten across the front in neat slanted letters. For a second, my heart raced. Could it be from Clara? I opened it slowly, careful not to tear whatever was inside. A single sheet of paper slipped out, a medical invoice for a child therapy clinic in another city. The name printed at the top was Clara Hale, and below it, patient, Noah Hale. The date? 2 weeks before she'd left him at my door, but that wasn't what chilled me. At the bottom, in the payment section, someone else's name appeared, E. Lawson. I didn't know an E. Lawson. That night, after Noah fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with that paper under the yellow light. I stared at the name over and over, whispering it like a riddle. Who paid for my grandson's therapy? I called the clinic the next morning, pretending to confirm an appointment. The woman on the phone hesitated. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hale, that file is closed." "Closed?" I asked. "Yes," she said softly. "Your daughter cancelled all future sessions the day after this invoice." So Clara had lied about getting help for him. She'd started, then stopped, and someone else had paid for it. The mystery grew heavier with each passing week. I wanted to be angry, but I couldn't afford that. Noah needed calm, not chaos, and yet every time I tucked him into bed, I wondered what Clara had been escaping. By summer, Noah had made small progress, words not many, but enough to let me glimpse the bright, organised mind behind those quiet eyes. One morning, while I was folding laundry, he tugged my sleeve and pointed at the fridge. "Green cup," he said softly. His voice cracked on the last syllable, like the word itself was too fragile to carry. I froze. "Yes, baby." "Green cup." He smiled, barely, but it was real. That night, as I washed the dishes, the envelope still sat on the counter. My eyes kept drifting to the signature, E. Lawson, whoever that was. They'd been part of Clara's life before everything fell apart, and something told me that name would matter again, because when a storm begins, it always leaves a trail. And mine was just starting to show itself. 3 months later, I'd come face to face with the man behind that signature, and he'd tell me a truth about Clara that would change how I saw everything, even my daughter's abandonment. It was one of those hazy July afternoons when the air felt thick enough to drown in. Noah was sitting on the living room floor, tracing the same circle pattern in his sketchbook, tight loops over and over, humming under his breath. That sound had become part of my home now, like the steady tick of a clock. Then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, a man stood there, mid-40s, neatly dressed, holding a small folder. His eyes were kind but tired, the kind of tired that comes from carrying too many regrets. "Mrs. Hale?" he asked. Yes. My name's Edward Lawson. The name hit me like a slap. The signature from the envelope. My pulse jumped. You paid for my grandson's therapy? He nodded, looking down. I did. Clara and I... We worked together for a short time. She told me about Noah, about how hard things were. I stepped aside, unsure whether to slam the door or let him in. Curiosity won. We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd taught Noah to eat with a fork, where I'd cried through long nights of worry. Edward rested his hands on the folder. Clara wasn't a bad person, he began, but she was scared. She thought she'd ruined her life by having a son. I snapped. He sighed. By having a son who didn't fit into her world. She wanted to help him, but she didn't know how. When she came to me for a loan, she was already desperate. I paid for a few therapy sessions, but she stopped going. She said she couldn't face it. I stared at the man across from me. Do you know where she is now? He shook his head. Last I heard, she'd moved to another city, said she needed to start over. He slid a small photograph across the table. It was old. Clara sitting on a park bench, hair tied back, Noah asleep in her lap. She looked lost, not cruel, not careless, just hollow. She loved him, Edward said quietly. She just didn't know how to stay. After he left, I sat at the table long after sunset, the photo trembling in my hands. For the first time, I didn't feel just anger. I felt grief. Maybe Clara hadn't abandoned Noah out of malice. Maybe she'd been broken in ways I couldn't see. But the ache in my chest didn't change the truth. She was gone, and Noah was mine now. That night, Noah looked up from his sketchbook and said softly, Grandma sad. I froze. He'd noticed. I knelt beside him, touched his shoulder gently. Just tired, sweetheart. He stared at me for a long time, then whispered, Okay. But I wasn't just tired. Because a year later, that same man, Edward Lawson, would appear again. Only this time, with news that would drag Clara's name back into our lives for good. By the time a full year passed, Noah had settled into a rhythm I didn't dare disturb. He was thriving in his own quiet way, reading small chapter books, correcting me when I skipped words, even laughing softly at the parts he liked. The sound of his laughter was something I'd waited years to hear. I'd almost convinced myself that the world outside our small house had forgotten about us. Until one rainy afternoon in August 2013, when the past came knocking again. The knock was sharp, deliberate, 3 times. I opened the door and froze. It was Edward Lawson again, soaked to the bone, holding an umbrella and a folder wrapped in plastic. He looked nervous this time, eyes darting past me as if expecting someone to follow. Mrs. Hale, he said. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't important. I stepped aside, dread curling in my stomach. What is it? He sat at the same kitchen table where he'd told me Clara's story a year ago. Your daughter reached out to me last month, he said quietly. The words felt like thunder in my chest. Clara! She said she was ready to come home. She wanted to see Noah. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But something in his voice told me it wasn't that simple. Did she say why now? Edward nodded slowly. She's been struggling. She told me she made mistakes. But there's something else. She's not alone. There's a man with her. Calls himself her representative. I frowned. Representative? Lawyer, he clarified. He's handling paperwork. The word paperwork lodged in my throat like a stone. What kind of paperwork? He hesitated. Custody petitions, financial guardianship documents, things that suggest she wants to reclaim Noah legally. My stomach turned to ice. She abandoned him, Edward. She left him with nothing but a toothbrush and a lie. "I know," he said, voice thick with guilt. "That's why I came here first. I wanted you to be prepared. She's trying to build a case that she never left, that she's been supporting him all along." I stared at him. Supporting him how? She's creating fake proof, money transfers, visit logs, even therapy records. It felt like the walls of my kitchen were closing in. 11 years of love, patience and sacrifice, and she was trying to erase it all with forged papers. Edward placed a small flash drive on the table. "This has the first documents I've seen. You'll need help. A lawyer." When he left, the silence was deafening. I turned toward the hallway. Noah stood there, eyes wide, clutching his green cup. "Mommy?" he asked softly. My heart shattered. "Not yet, sweetheart," I whispered. Not yet, but I was wrong. Because months later, Clara would return, and she wouldn't come alone. She'd come armed with lies sharp enough to tear our world apart. It was a grey November afternoon, the kind that hangs heavy in your bones. Noah was 16 now, taller, quieter and sharper than anyone ever gave him credit for. His love for computers had blossomed into something remarkable. He'd spend hours coding in silence, building programs I couldn't begin to understand. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at old documents, scanning them, sorting them, like he was archiving our lives, piece by piece. That was the day the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the sound startled both of us. When I opened the door, my heart dropped. Clara stood there, 11 years older, dressed in a tailored coat, her hair cut short and sleek. She wasn't alone. Beside her stood a man in a charcoal suit, briefcase in hand, the kind of man who looked like he didn't knock. He announced. "Hello, Mom," Clara said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes flickered everywhere except at me. "This is Mr. Wells, my attorney." Attorney. The word stung worse than her smile. "Can we come in?" she asked. I wanted to slam the door, to scream, to tell her she lost that right years ago. But behind me I heard Noah's footsteps. He stood in the hallway, silent as ever, watching. When Clara saw him, her composure faltered. "Noah," she breathed, like the name alone might fix everything. He didn't speak, didn't move, just watched her with the same analytical calm he used when debugging code. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table that had seen every version of our story. My tears. Noah's first words, and now betrayal wearing perfume. Mr. Wells placed a folder in front of me. Ms. Hale would like to re-establish parental custody and assume guardianship of her son's financial interests. His what? I snapped. Clara swallowed. "Mum, I know I made mistakes, but I've stayed involved from afar. I sent support, checked in through the clinic, Liar. The word left me before I could stop it. You never called. You never sent a dime. You disappeared." Her lawyer leaned forward. "We have documentation proving otherwise." He slid papers toward me. Financial statements, medical records, visit logs, even supposed call transcripts. Every line was a lie, every signature forged. Noah glanced at the documents, then at me. His face didn't change, but his fingers tapped the table in a rhythm I knew well. The sound of him thinking. I was shaking. "You think you can rewrite the past with ink?" Clara's lips trembled. "I just want what's fair." "Fair?" I whispered. "Fair ended when you left him with nothing." But as she spoke, Noah leaned closer to me and whispered, "Let her talk." I didn't understand then, but he was already 3 steps ahead of her, because what Clara didn't know was that her son had built something far more powerful than her lies, and soon he'd use it to expose every one of them in front of the world. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and nerves. I sat beside Noah, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the folder of documents our lawyer had prepared. Across from us sat Clara, looking every bit the picture of remorseful motherhood, soft grey sweater, teary eyes, and a lawyer who knew exactly when to smile. Judge Henderson adjusted her glasses and began, "We're here today to determine rightful guardianship of Noah Hale's assets and well-being." Clara's lawyer stood first, confident and rehearsed. "My client, Ms. Hale, has maintained contact and support for her son despite difficult circumstances. We have proof of regular communication and financial contribution. I wanted to shout liar, but my attorney squeezed my arm. Stay calm." Clara spoke then, her voice trembling in that calculated way that manipulative people perfect over time. "I never stopped being Noah's mother," she said, glancing toward him with watery eyes. "I just needed time to heal. I've supported him from afar." I saw the judge nod slightly, sympathy. That terrified me, because for the first time I realized the lies looked real enough to win. Then Noah stood up. "Your Honor," he said softly. "May I show something?" The judge looked surprised. "You may." Noah carried his laptop to the witness stand. His voice was calm, precise, but beneath it was a quiet strength I'd never heard before. "I've been documenting my life since I was 9. Every therapy session, every school report, every phone bill, every receipt. Everything is digitally archived and verified." He connected the laptop to the courtroom display. "These are the documents my mother claims to have filed over the years. Screens filled with forms and signatures. But my system tracks metadata, when files were created, edited, and saved. These were all made 6 weeks ago." The room went silent. He clicked again. "And these are her signatures." Then he pulled up old school records from 2010, showing her authentic ones side by side. His algorithm ran comparisons, different angles, pressure points, inconsistencies flashing in red. "These signatures are forged." Clara's lawyer jumped up. "Objection! This is speculation." Noah didn't flinch. "It's not speculation, sir. It's proof. This software has already been verified by multiple companies. It's what I built, and what I sold earlier this year." Judge Henderson leaned forward. "You built this system yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor," Noah said simply. "To protect the truth." And in that moment, everything shifted. The judge reviewed his evidence silently for a long time before speaking. "Ms. Hale," she said coldly, "your documentation is fraudulent. Guardianship remains with Mrs. Margaret Hale. This court will also refer your case for potential charges of perjury." Clara's face crumpled, but I felt no victory, just peace. Outside, under the afternoon sun, I looked at my grandson, the boy who once couldn't say a word, now defending the truth with brilliance I could barely comprehend. "You saved us," I whispered. He looked at me, a small flicker of a smile on his lips. "I just made sure what's real stays real." I held his hand, feeling the weight of all the years between that first weekend and this moment. Some stories aren't about revenge. They're about truth finally standing tall after years of silence. If you were in my place, could you forgive a child who betrayed your trust, but was still your own? Tell me what you would have done. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories from Echoes from Her, where every story reminds us that truth always finds its way home.